Okay, so hope you're all well. Obviously, you've been watching our holiday vlogs, or I hope you've been watching our holiday vlogs. A lot of madness. I do apologise for the stuff with the toenail. I think sometimes I just lose track of boundaries. I just thought I'd have a brief update with you guys on mental health. Insofar as I have a little bit of a shameful admission to make. We were going to talk about it whilst we were in Greece, but it sort of tugged against the tone and feel of what we were trying to do with the vlogs, and the vlogs are a good opportunity really for Nanny Di to not muscle through, but distract herself from some of the sad news that she's been dealing with in her life, and well, all our lives really. And I forgot to take my bloody pills with me, didn't I? So, having been feeling very odd, very muted for the 2 weeks running up to Greece, I was kicking myself when I discovered that I'd just forgotten to pack them, and I was feeling really under the weather when we set off. Been a bit distracted. There'd been the whole Millie Bobby Brown thing, and so it just wasn't. I don't know. I'm not in the routine or the headspace of thinking that I take pills for the depression thing again. So, and then an interesting thing happened whereby I wasn't taking them. And then me and Nadia and my mum were talking whilst we were in Greece, and I did feel happier. I did feel sort of happy. Now, what I'm trying to talk about now is this is the difficulty with depression and feeling down and being in any living situation. I'm sure I did feel better, and it would have been easy to think, right, he's forgotten his pills, he's not taking his pills, he's feeling better, therefore the pills aren't working for him. Well, two things. It takes some time, as a lot of you guys have said on some of your comments, to get into the sort of, not rhythm, but into the effects of the pills that I'm taking, as it did with the citalopram when I was taking them before. But equally, it's very easy when you've landed in a beautifully hot country with all the people who are dearest to you, well, most of the people that are dearest to you, and you're there to have a good time, and it's sunny weather, and there's the sea, and there's tasty food, and it's a nice villa, and all that kind of stuff. And we call that the geographicals, the idea that, you move away from your domestic situation or your everyday situation, thinking that you can escape all of the issues that you're feeling by just moving to a different space. Well, ironically, what seemed to have happened here was we moved to Greece, and I seemed to be a lot chirpier. So how much of that was just being chirpier because we were on holiday? And how much of that was being chirpier because I'd forgotten the drugs? I'd have thought there wasn't enough time, actually, for me to be not taking the drugs after 2 weeks of taking the drugs, for the not taking the drugs to have taken effect, if you know what I mean. Anyway, the long and the short of it is I've forgotten for a week. And then I came back, and we've come back to London, and I've been, quibbling and oohing and ahhing and hesitating and worrying and fretting in the 24 hours we've been back. We haven't been back that long, as to whether I should stop taking them. And interestingly, I woke up on the first morning back in London, and all the same anxiety, all the same stress, all the same sense of foreboding and dark cloudness and fear and loathing and, just got to get on, got to distract, kicked in. And so in a weird way, the geographicals were true. It's just that the geographicals of being back at home were no different to when I left, except this time I've now had a week of not having my antidepressants. So I thought I'd phone the doctor. Well, Nadia suggested I should phone the doctor and ask advice. He wanted me to call in and check in with him after a month, so it would have been 3 weeks, and if I'm going to continue with them, I need a repeat prescription. So I rang him up. He said, yes, the initial side effects are perversely that they make you feel like the very thing you're trying to avoid feeling like, which is sort of down and lethargic and slightly distanced and slightly weird. And that, one needs to persist. So he repeated my prescription, I've got it on order, and I'm going to start again, essentially. And yeah, I do feel a bit of concern about all that because, I think Nads and my mum and the girls perhaps felt that I seemed a lot happier without the drugs, but I just, it's very hard to tell whether one is. And anyway, the long and the short of it is, all of this stuff, is it, isn't it, could it be, isn't it, might it be, might it not be, blah, 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 blah. this is, for me, what the problems of taking any kind of antidepressant or anti-anxiety or whatever pill it is that you're prescribed, Prozac-like thing, is, you know, what are the normal everyday experiences and emotions that you feel, and what are those that you want some kind of medical intervention to take the edge off? What of those emotions are they, you know, which of those emotions are chronic diagnostic problems, and which are just quite natural reactions to the world? How much of my personality is just naturally one born of, due to various things through my upbringing, born of anxiety or seeing things half empty, but it never stops me from doing things. But, you know, how much of that is just who I am? That makes me who I am. I'm that sort of person. So should I necessarily medicate those elements of myself away? And then there's the feeling of waking up and feeling so overwhelmingly sick with worry or fear about nothing specific, and I have to stress that, nothing specific, that you feel that you just desperately want to take the edge off it, much in the way that a lot of people at a weekend or during the week, if you're me, or every day, if you were me, will with a drink or with a cigarette. Or I do, you know, I medicate with coffee and tea, and when I was not being as Joe Wixie or Jimmy Timpson, as my mum would say, I would do with food too. So, you know, everyone has systems and mechanisms for kind of coping. So anyway, I'm back in that headspace. I'm back in that sort of conflicting, contradictory tug of war between wanting to, not wanting to, feeling that I should just accept what I am and feeling what I feel, assuming that most of what I'm feeling is just naturally how I react to many things, and that tomorrow morning I might wake up better, feeling better. If I've slept better, maybe it's just because I didn't sleep well. You know, but how much of it is to do with taking the drugs? You know, to quote that famous song, the drugs don't work. They just make it worse. Or do they? I don't fucking know. It's a fucking head fuck, isn't it? But here's what I did do today. I went to an AA meeting. I went to my AA meeting in central London at Oxford Street, which I haven't been to for a while. Walked in, bang at the beginning, sat down at the back of the room, and just turned my phone off, sat down, smiled at a couple of people, recognised one or two people in there, and listened. And most of the sharing, which is what we call it when people talk, you don't ever cross-share. When they say cross-share, it means you don't, if someone doesn't say something about how they're feeling, and someone goes, oh yeah, well, how did you feel about, you don't have a conversation. You pipe up, I'm Mark, I'm an alcoholic, and you speak for 5 minutes. But most people in an AA meeting will do that in response to what's called a chair, which is someone who's invited in to talk about their story for 20 minutes. And it was a really, really good meeting today, in which the common theme really was about emotional alcoholism. The idea that you can not pick up a drink, you can be sober, you can be going about your everyday life, living in the shadows of addiction, and yet you can be emoting or living your life emotionally still in the sort of in the ways that an alcoholic does, you know, thinking things becoming unmanageable, becoming stressed, becoming anxious, becoming undisciplined in many areas of your daily life. So words that come up, and what I like about AA meetings, I think it's the film editor in me. My first ever job was as an editor, and I love montages of images, but I also love montages of words and sounds. And as I was sat there today, I didn't open my mouth and share. I nearly did, but they ran out of time. I really like the way in which you come out of some really good AA meetings with a sort of audio montage of phrases and comments. And one of them was about discipline, needing discipline in your recovery and sobriety. One of them was about emotional alcoholism, the idea that one can, you know, be observing all the rules and doing all the right things regarding substance abuse, but you can still be thinking in a, as they call it, stinking thinking way. And so you need to guard against that, and that's one of the reasons that, you know, people say keep plugged into the fellowship and keep coming to meetings, etc. Someone else had a really interesting thing to say, and he likewise, this person was talking about how they veered away from going to AA meetings for 10 years, and he was 15 years sober. and he picked up a drink, and that really shook me to the core, actually, because I'm coming up to, I know Nadia often says 16 years, but I worked it out. 2004, November, I stopped, or October 28th. So it's 15 years this October. And I thought, 15 years, my God. I couldn't think how, I couldn't even imagine picking up a drink. And so it's quite telling when someone says in a meeting, after 15 years I picked up. It really cuts you. It makes you think, oh, bloody hell, this is a baffling disease that, as they often say, is doing press-ups in the room next door, even when you think you're in control of it. But he had a really good phrase. He said, yeah, great. I've been 15 years sober, and now I'm 3 years since my last relapse. But he said, I've got too many years of sobriety, or I had too many years of sobriety and thought of just the years of sobriety, but I didn't have enough days. And what he meant by that was, you're only ever really in the day that you're in. You're only really sober that day, regardless of how many days and years before that. You've got to be dealing with today, because today is now, and that's when you could potentially, and also obviously potentially not, pick up a drink. So I just thought it was a really interesting phrase. And so there was a lot of very meaningful sharing and a lot of very meaningful words, incredibly articulate. I was reminded about how emotionally articulate 12-step meetings are. People from all walks of life, all struggling, but also talking about, mainly, no one talked about alcohol. Everyone talked about the dangers of veering away from the routines of self-care and being plugged into some kind of 12-step fellowship or some kind of recovery system. So that worked for me today, so I felt it was a step in the right direction. I took myself out of work for an hour, went in, sat, came out, felt like it was very meditative, but I was very plugged in and conscious. I wasn't sort of, sometimes I go to AA meetings and I just drift. So yeah, that's where I'm at. That's where things are at on the mental health front at the moment. I feel a bit of a twat for forgetting my pills. I felt more of a twat for admitting to you guys that I'd forgotten my pills, because it's kind of mucked up and muddied and clouded the kind of coherence of what's going on here. But as I say, I'm going to pick up my prescription, I'm going to carry on, see what happens. And I'm definitely going to be upping my AA meetings. So if you have, maybe you're not struggling with alcohol, maybe you're struggling with food, maybe you're struggling with drugs, spliff, cocaine, whatever. Maybe you're struggling with sex and codependency. Codependency is a massive, without going into the details, we know someone very close to us who suffered really quite profoundly with codependency. And codependency is a form of addiction that's so corrosive, much in the way that food is, i.e. you have to eat, so you have to engage with food. And so the idea that you have to be abstemious is really difficult because you need food to survive. And likewise, codependency is about having relationships, and we all live in the world and we all have to relate and be with people. So, whatever your thing is, and if you are the partner of someone who struggles with addiction or is an active addict or whatever, of course there's Al-Anon. I was just reminded that these places, regardless of whether you sign up to them and need to go to them repeatedly or go to them on a regular basis, they are just safe places to stop within the hurly-burly of, say, London town, which is where I was today, to sit in the basement of a church with approximately 45 other people, where no one's judging anyone else, and where so much emotional articulacy was connecting us all. It's a little bit like that scene in Raiders of the Lost Ark. I've always got to have a movie analogy. But that scene in Raiders of the Lost Ark at the end when the Ark of the Covenant comes out and all the German soldiers are looking, and then it fires out and it goes through all their chests and it connects them all and kills them. Well, imagine that in reverse. Sitting in an AA meeting is like all that sort of light passes through all of you and kind of connects you all. So anyway, there you go. Mental health update.